Well, folks, it's time for an update. A few weeks ago, I told you about the autofocus issues that I was having with my Canon EOS R5 Mark II that seemed to coincide with the release of Firmware 1.0.3 on March the 18th. The camera and lens, well, they just weren't working together. They weren't pulling focus properly, even when I had single point AF turned on. No matter what I did, the system wouldn't pull focus, even when it recognized the subject. I sent the R5 II in for repair as, while I was testing, the Ninja 5 fell onto the LCD, the top LCD, and I just got my camera back yesterday. And you won't believe what I discovered. Well, let's break it down step by step, and if you're serious about staying ahead of the latest camera gear, do us a favor and hit that subscribe button. It helps this channel grow while keeping you in the loop. While my camera was in at Canon getting repaired, they sent me a loaner, and you know what I did, right? I slapped the 100 to 500 millimeter on here, the exact same lens I was having trouble with the R5 Mark II, and it wasn't the only one. It's important to note, but I put it on here, I went out shooting, and I didn't have any problems. Now this had Firmware 1.0.2. I thought, okay, well this coincides with when I started having problems. So maybe it is the firmware update. I mean, after all, Canon did update the firmware 1.0.3 by fixing some of the autofocus capabilities, which could have very well have caused my problem. So I thought, great, okay, well, I just got my camera back. I got it back yesterday. And so I decided, okay, let's grab the 100 to 500, let's take it outside, grabbing the Ninja 5 again, only this time I certainly made sure it was tight. I think what happened the last time, have you ever tried screwing something in and the threads just don't catch properly? You think it's tight and it's not? I think that's what happened, and it fell on the top LCD and cracked it. So I was extra careful this time, and I wasn't shooting in the morning like I normally was. It was after work, after 4 o'clock. I didn't have any issues. It was snappy. It was locking on every single time. Now, there's a few times where, you know, sometimes it pulls, it doesn't know where to pull the focus, so it goes and hunts a little bit. A little bit of that, but mostly it was very, very snappy. Everything was great. So I thought, yeah, boy, this is going to be one of those multi-day tests where you spend hours upon hours, and I've already spent many days testing it before I even got to this point. So again, today we had sunny conditions. I at least wanted to match the weather conditions, to match the color, the dynamic range, the contrast, and all that sort of stuff. Shooting in the exact same area. Again, I didn't have any issues. But then I noticed something strange. Normally I set my camera to go off after a minute or two, so I save on the batteries. We all know what those LP E6P batteries are like if we just let them run. So I thought, okay, let's take a look. So I didn't reload the, the camera settings, because I took a look and everything seemed to be correct. A few things in the manual mode were different, but other than that, everything looked good. I went to take a look at power settings, and you'll take a guess. Take a guess what had changed. All the power saving settings had been turned off, with the exception of the EVF, which was set to power off after 1 minute. So I changed the screen dimmer to 15 seconds, screen off to 30 seconds, and auto power off to 1 minute. And guess what happened? Well, Ryan, let's cue the footage. Now this first clip was the worst situation that had happened. I'd woken it up and I wanted to, well, capture a bird. So I had single point on. I couldn't even get to the point where I could focus at all. I tried looking close. I tried looking far away. I tried looking in between. And all the time, I'm tapping the shutter button, just hoping I can give it a kick in the pants. And it seemed like minutes, but eventually, by pointing it and moving it around, it eventually came around and started focusing on everything. But it took some time. I thought, great, I've duplicated the problem with the Ninja 5 so people can see. But I didn't stop there. I tried some other situations, and in this case, we've got a bird sitting on a lookout point. So we got a blue sky above it, not directly into the sun, and we've got a wooden railing lower down. And I couldn't get it to focus. It actually looked like a pretty good shot. But no, the camera wouldn't focus. It wouldn't focus at all. And I tried, and I tried, and I tried. I tried moving around, the same thing I did previously. And finally, the bird just gave up and flew away. But luckily, another model showed up. Once again, it started having trouble. It even recognized the bird, but wouldn't focus. I tried, no luck. But then I turned the camera off and it worked again. So what I found out is that when I had the power settings on, and which is what I always do with my camera, because I go out, I spend a lot of time shooting, I do take a couple of batteries with me, but you know how it is, you want them to last, right? So I will automatically have the LCD and the screen go off after about 15 seconds, well, maybe 30 seconds. I can't remember where I had it saved. I'll have to load my camera settings and take a look, but probably around 15 to 30 seconds, and then have the camera power off after a minute or two. As soon as I made those changes to the power settings, that's when I started having all sorts of problems. Now again, as soon as I got my R5 Mark II, I went into the camera and I made the changes to the power settings and I didn't have any issues. Not until Firmware 1.0.3 came along. Now I want to take a look on this camera here. This is the R5 Mark II that's been lent to me from Canon. So I'm going to do a video on the Canon CPS program because I got to tell you, whatever you pay into that program, spoilers, it's well worth it. So I'll need to put my glasses on here. I want to see what the power settings are. The power saving settings are on the R5 Mark II, the one that was lent to me with Firmware 1.0.2. So let's go all the way over to the settings here, the wrench settings. I wish I could show you this as I go along. Well, you know what? I wonder if I can do this. What happens if I get up? Oh, mic's over here. Let's try this. So we can do this here. Oh, everything's reversey. Oh, that's not what I want to do. Back off. Come on, let's focus. Okay, I think that's as good as we're going to get. So, there we go. What am I going to do here? Where am I? I'm lost my focus. So I'm looking for power saving. It's here somewhere. I might have already have gone by it. There it is, power savings. Well, look at that. 20 seconds for screen dimmer. Screen off for 30 seconds. Now, auto power off is disabled, so I'm going to try that on my R5 Mark II, the one I own. But the viewfinder is set to 1 minute when it turns off. And again, I want to show you the firmware. Not that it really probably matters at this point, but let's take a look at the firmware version. There you go. You can see it's firmware 1.0.2. So obviously, I have some more testing to do, but the reason why I'm putting this video out there, it's the first kind of aha moment that I've had, and I think I'm onto something here. I think it has to do with those power savings. And actually, before I forget, let's go ahead and turn my camera on here. And I want to change those settings so that way I don't forget, because I do that. So let's make sure it looks identical to what I have. So auto power off is set to disable, screen dimmer 20 seconds, screen off 30 seconds, auto power off disable, and viewfinder to 1 minute. So that's set, and it's in manual mode, right? Tell me I was shooting in manual mode. Yes, yeah, manual mode. Oh, power off. Left it on one day, and apparently the battery lasted a good several days. So we can turn this one off, and let's take the battery out because I don't want to change this one. I don't want to do anything to the R5 Mark II because it's kind of a baseline test for me. I've always had power savings on my R5 Mark II since I got it August the 20th. And I went from firmware 1.0.0 to 1.0.1 to 1.0.2 to 1.0.3. Now I did notice some strange issues with 1.0.2 with this new lens. That's not it. It's probably upstairs. I don't see it here. With the 50mm f1.4, what I would notice is that if I was shooting out on the ice with my son, we were doing some ice fishing, and what I noticed was something strange is that everything would work, and then if the camera went to sleep, not powered off, when it went to sleep, when it would wake up, the autofocus system just didn't seem to function very well. With my R5 Mark II, with those settings turned off, again, yesterday it was bulletproof, it was fast, it was snappy. I didn't have any of the issues. I couldn't get it to screw up. it was once I turned those power settings on with Firmware 1.0.3 that I started having problems. So shipped from Canon, the only thing that auto turned off after a minute was the viewfinder. Whereas this camera with Firmware 1.0.2, with the power settings all on, with the exception of, well, which, see, you probably remember, I've forgotten already. I believe it was the automatically turn power off, which was disabled. Oh, I took the battery out. Yeah, but I remember, that's correct. See, this is what happens when you get old. If you're young and you're watching, you think this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. No, it just takes a while for the information to come to the foreground. So let's wrap this thing up. I'm going to do some more testing this weekend, but I think what's going on here is that there's something with Firmware 1.0.3 changed the autofocus system, so that way it's bumping into the power saving settings. There's something there that just isn't working right, and it's causing things to act up. And there's 3 times this afternoon where the autofocus just would not work, other than powering the camera on and off, which I didn't want to do. I wanted you to see everything happen, because as soon as I power off, the Ninja stops recording, and you can't see if I'm doing anything funny. So I wanted you to see how I couldn't get the autofocus. A lot of times previously with the Mark I or the R5 Mark II prior to Firmware 1.0.3, if I kind of half pressed the shutter button, the focus system would wake up and start working again. But not with 1.0.3 with the power savings that I had. So for those of you that say you're running with Firmware 1.0.3 and not having any issues at all, what are your power settings? Let us know in the comment section down below. And for those of you that have been having problems, try turning the power savings settings off to the way I had it. The only thing that powers off automatically after a minute is the viewfinder. Let me know in the comment section down below. Let's see if we can help troubleshoot this together. I'm also going to reach out to Canon tomorrow. They're closed already. We're going to reach out tomorrow, and I'm going to let them know what I discovered and point them towards this video. But I'll give them the option of having the raw files from the Ninja 5, which are in the gigabytes. I think the smallest file is 1.6 gigabytes, and some of them go up to I don't know how far. So this video might serve as a really good might serve as a good troubleshooting step. But I know that the engineers, they like to get their hands on the original files. And remember, this was happening in video. I didn't test it in stills because when I first had this problem, I noticed it in video. Another thing you can let me know too is if you're, now I got a lot of comments in the previous video with photographers saying, yeah, everything looked great. They'd get back and they'd find that a lot of the images were out of focus. So some people are having the same problem. So does that help? I know I'm rambling a little bit here because I haven't got things scripted. I just got home from shooting and I just thought, oh, I've got to record this now because I've had a bit of an epiphany. You know, it's just one of those things where you're going, I think I might have figured out what's going on, because with Canon, when they're testing it, they have a certain QA/QC procedures that they have to follow. And based on how I got my camera back, those power saving settings were different. They had changed it. And if they were testing under those settings, that would make sense as to why they didn't have an issue. Interesting, right? And that would make sense because you want to test a camera, you make sure when it's on, and those power saving settings can actually turn a camera off and change its state. So anyhow, thank you so much for tuning in. And by the way, if you want to learn a little bit more about what goes on behind the scenes, then you might want to check my membership levels. Click join. You'll see the 3 of them there. The first membership level, I think, is $1.99, where you get camera emojis when you comment, and you also get loyalty badges. But at $9.99 a month, that's where you get the behind the scenes videos, where I try to put out at least one a week, letting you know what goes on behind the scenes, quite literally. Quite often I don't shoot with the R5 Mark II or the 70D. Quite often I'm shooting with the iPhone because it's with me, and I'll be out and I'll just do a bit of a diary of what happened, like today. Don't feel that you have to do it. It's just for the 1% of the 1% that really wants to know a bit more about what goes on. Well, it's designed for you. For the rest of you, have yourself a great day, a great week, and we'll see you again soon.